Yes, we can get started, Cameron, whenever you're ready.
All right, well then, welcome everybody. Right on time. It is 6:45 on the West Coast. It's 9:45 on the East Coast. And you can kind of tell because Logesh is on the East Coast. He's looking much more ready to go than me over here on the West Coast, who's still in the dark. But we're really happy to be with you today. If you're here to hear about learning how to put together an applications roadmap, and learn about what we've been doing in that space, especially with one specific customer that we're going to be going over. In fact, we'll use examples from other customers as well if we can. You're in the right space. And I hope that you're really enjoying this conference. I know that there's been a lot of really good content, and we're really excited to be a major sponsor here. We sponsor an HCM track and just being very involved in everything that Quest is doing, as well as the PeopleSoft team at Oracle. So anyway, nice to see you today. So that's me. I'm Cameron McClurg, Vice President with SpearMC, and I have been doing PeopleSoft work for many years. And prior to consulting, I was director of financial systems at an organization as an employee. So I wasn't doing consulting work. I was putting together essentially a roadmap, but for just one organization, where we were balancing the needs of different groups within the organization, taking a look at the technology, what we had, what we could potentially have, and where things were headed, as well as the personnel that we had in place to support that technology. So I was doing that work for many years prior to coming to SpearMC as a consultant. So some of what I do now with SpearMC is a natural transition of just doing it from where I was doing it for one company, now working with many companies. And so I like to get out there, talk about new technology and all that stuff, and help organizations that are using PeopleSoft and trying to determine how do you balance still leveraging this really robust legacy application that isn't going anywhere, it's continuing to be invested in. How do we leverage that and embrace and involve new technology? So we'll talk about that a little bit more, but that's me, and I'll turn it over to Logesh.
Thanks, Cameron, and good morning, everyone. And as Cameron mentioned, hope all of you have been having a great conference so far. I think it's a perfect day and time. It's the second day of the conference and one of the early sessions. So glad we are able to present this topic at this time. So, and especially if you have missed any other sessions due to various conflicts, everything is recorded. So you always can go back and watch the recording as well. So I'm Logesh Balasubramanian, and I'm a managing director at SpearMC, and I predominantly oversee our PeopleSoft HCM and HR technology related projects and activities. Work very closely with Cameron on various engagements and opportunities, and also we collaborate quite a bit on various emerging technologies as well. So this particular case study we are going to be discussing for our roadmap and the process that we use for this roadmap functionality. This is something that I've been very closely associated with over the last few years. So glad to be presenting and talking as part of this presentation today. Along with Cameron and myself, Marcus Bodie, our president and co-founder, is also part of the presentation team. He is part of the group today, but the majority of the content is going to be covered by between myself and Cameron. Yeah, right. With that, I'll hand over to Cameron to introduce us as an organization and what we specialize in before we get started with the content for today.
All right, thanks, Logesh. Yeah, so we, our focus really, and I think we have the slide a little bit later on, but our focus really is PeopleSoft. It's really when a few years ago, when other organizations in our space, in the consulting space, started saying, you know what, we should start expanding into other SaaS applications, and we should start doing this and that. We said, you know what, we're going to double down on PeopleSoft. We believe that there's staying power with the application. We believe that we're so in touch with our customers that we have a lot of customers who are like, yeah, no, this is PeopleSoft. We're going to stay on PeopleSoft for a while. And we felt that there was a specific niche for us there. And so we just stayed there. We doubled down while still embracing new technology, but new technology that was supporting the PeopleSoft space and PeopleSoft customers. And so part of that was embracing Oracle Cloud Infrastructure and how that could actually help PeopleSoft customers. As part of that, we were recognized by Gartner in the 2021 and 2022 market guide for Oracle professional and managed services. We're very proud about that, and it just really is a reflection of our hyper focus on PeopleSoft. We're the only PeopleSoft dedicated firm in that market report. So we're very pleased with that. Again, it's just a reflection of our focus. The other thing that is kind of new this year that we're really excited about, and again, just really happy that we can say this and we can offer this, is that we about a year or two ago started to take a look at some of the trends with some of the organizations like ours who are doing consulting work for our customers, and some of the needs that some of those customers have around specific certifications that partners might have with respect to data security, processes, personnel, all of that stuff that is, people can say, yes, we do this and yes, we do that, but this SOC 2 certification is actually a representation and a specific audit of those things within an organization like ours. So we went through the process. It was a long process, and we are now pleased to say that we are actually now SOC 2 Type 1 and Type 2 certified. And again, that is you can look that up and determine what all that means, but really it's about the security and data processes that we have that are safeguarding our clients' information. And we're just, again, happy to have that under our belt. And we feel that it's a differentiator for what we do for our customers. We have offices across the country. I always kind of chuckle about this slide specifically because it's not as important as it used to be, given that everybody's remote now, and even workers are remote and everything. But we have expanded across the country. Starting in 2004, we're across the country now, and wherever you're at, we have coverage. Let's put it that way. And yeah, this is kind of. I usually like to start with this slide, but this is kind of where we focus our attention. So really, PeopleSoft is our core. We don't have multiple cores, all right? PeopleSoft is the core, and anything that surrounds PeopleSoft is what we do. So it's the different pillars within PeopleSoft, the type of engagement that we might have with you, whether it's staff augmentation, a project, or if it's an ongoing relationship like a managed service type of situation, we can do that. We're talking today about Roadmap, which kind of covers all of these things. So with that, we'll get into the next stages. Oh, sorry, one more thing. Drilling into managed services, just specifically, managed services means nothing more then if you take a look at the different roles that are playing within your organization that support PeopleSoft, and deciding that you want an outside group to play one of those roles, one or more of those roles, right? It could be simply doing some testing, right? Where we will support you with a testing service that, we take a look at the new PUM image, roll it out, and we do the testing for you with PTF automated testing. It might be something like taking your application and moving it into Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, or it might be something more traditional like some element of technical support, system administration, or functional support. All of those things are simply part of the managed services mix. And when you come to us and say, we need help with something, we might take one part of that and say, yeah, we can do that part for you guys, keep these other parts. We'll just play a role. We're essentially a dotted line. Our organization's a dotted line into your organization, and we can just simply support you in the way you want to be supported. That's all really that means with managed services.
All right, thanks, Cameron. So in terms of the PeopleSoft assessment, before I even get into this, I just wanted to quickly call out a couple of things. One, if you have any questions, please use the chat functionality on the Pathable app so that you can post your questions there. It gets recorded and it becomes available later for people who see it as well, instead of posting the questions within the chat window on the Zoom. So that's one item I wanted to get it out. So we'll continue to monitor the chat window on the Pathable app to see if there are any questions. So please feel free to post a question as and when you have it. And most likely at the end of the session, we might have 5 to 10 minutes to address questions separately as well. With that, I'll get started with the assessment and road mapping topic for discussion today. And before I even get into the topic, I just wanted to highlight what is the need for this, right? Why we are talking about PeopleSoft application roadmap as a separate session. Now, if you had attended any of the roadmap sessions yesterday from Oracle, specifically the one from Robin on the HCM roadmap, he highlighted in a very succinct manner the need for customers, PeopleSoft customers, to have a plan, a roadmap on how they are going to maintain their application. So Oracle has done a wonderful job in the last many years now, to have a very clear plan about how Oracle PeopleSoft application is going to evolve. What is our plan from a rolling 10-year support? What is our plan from what are the features that are in the roadmap over 18 to 24 months, and how they are consistently delivering on that plan on a quarterly basis. So there is a clear path for PeopleSoft customers to see how the product is evolving. However, many years ago, I think 3-4 years ago now, when we started working with various customers, there was always a gap around customers having a plan in terms of addressing how they are going to maintain their PeopleSoft application. It could be a 3-year period, 5-year period, or even longer than that. There wasn't a clear-cut definition of what is going to happen. So when Cameron discussed about the managed services offering, so typically when we get into any discussions with customer around managed services where we can help, this topic around their plan and roadmap is always the first thing that comes into play. Like, what is your current state? Let's assess what's your current state, and let's put together a roadmap in terms of how where you see yourself going 3 years down the line, 5 years down the line. So this has become a consistent aspect of our service delivery, and PeopleSoft assessment and road mapping is a specific a service on its own that we offer as well for customers who just want to focus on that, and then can do the rest of the execution of it internally. So we do that. Now, the reason for this session is that the process that we do, the approach that we take towards building this assessment and roadmap is very transparent, and we want to make sure we share that process and approach and methodology with you so that you can, as an organization, do this work internally as well, right? So what we want to focus here is about not just what we do, but how we do it, so that you have a template or a process to go about doing that in your organization as well. With that, the first portion of the discussion is going to be focused on the assessment, which in essence is the actual work that is put into play to create a roadmap, right? So that's where the assessment piece comes in. So every roadmap engagement starts with an assessment work. So when it comes to assessment, the assessment, the scope of the assessment could be all-encompassing. Like, we could assess that a customer might ask, okay, can you do an assessment of our entire PeopleSoft footprint and create a roadmap for us? Or you might have a requirement to say, I would like to assess our entire enterprise applications footprint, which might involve PeopleSoft and some other applications on the periphery as well. Or it could be something a little bit more narrowed down at saying that you might have an area that is problematic or a business function that is problematic, and focus the assessment on that aspect. So it could be all-encompassing, or it could be something narrowed down, like, okay, we would like the assessment to happen on the entire procure-to-pay process, or an assessment on the position control function that we have been using and we are not happy with, right? So when it comes to the scope of the assessment, it could be very specific or all encompassing. Regardless of the scope, the approach through the assessment is going to be very much similar. It's just the scope might vary depending on which team we are interacting with, who in the organization we are interacting with, etc. So when it comes to the assessment or the approach to the assessment itself, we typically cover three things: people, process, technology. And usually the scope of work on each of these three areas vary depending upon what is the area that we are doing the assessment with. For example, for many PeopleSoft customers, the assessment could be a purely technology related. A common question that we get from our customers is that can you assess and tell us, are we making the best use of the PeopleSoft application? Are we making the best use of the tool set that we have with? So the focus is on those questions are mostly technology front, like starting with have you upgraded to the latest version? Are you from a technology point of view? Have you taken up the latest PUM images? And not just taking it up from a technology and a platform perspective. Are you deploying those new features and functionalities that are coming out that are relevant to the modules and functionalities that you use? And how reliable is your mechanism to keep current, like how often you're updating, how often you're staying current, etc. All this would typically fall under the technology aspect of the assessment. Now, when it comes to technology alone, it's not going to solve all of your problems or all of the challenges in the organization. Some of them, in many cases, would be in the process layer, where technology would be an aspect of it, but the business process associated with the function, for example, it could be procure to pay, it could be position control. There might be different teams, there might be different processes, different handovers happening across the process. Those could be the areas that might be creating problems. So when we slightly zoom out and look at a bigger picture, we review the end-to-end business processes associated with the application. So is the process efficient? Are there functionalities that are repetitive? Are there functionalities that are consistently performed? And are there functionalities that can be automated? Has it been automated? Or you're still using manual processes or functionalities that have been available in the system but not leveraged, things like that. So the next step is to review around the process aspect of it. And finally comes the people aspect of this assessment. Now, people aspect typically could be a standalone activity on its own, or it could be coupled with the process and technology aspects. And when we talk about people, it could be people in the IT function supporting the PeopleSoft system. Are you adequately staffed to support the volume of work to keep your PeopleSoft application up to date and current? Or it could also be about the people actually doing the work in terms of operational activities, in terms of different business function. Is your payroll team adequately staffed? Is your position team, HR team adequately staffed to manage the volume of positions that you are managing on a day-to-day basis? And not just in terms of staffing, but also in terms of are these people rightly trained, skilled to do these jobs? Do they have the collaboration mechanisms to work collaboratively across the business process so that the handovers are smooth between these different business activities? So all those aspects would fall under the people assessment. And as I said, not all of this would be part of every single assessment. But when we talk about a roadmap for an enterprise application like PeopleSoft, it could be all encompassing across finance, supply chain, HCM, ELM, all of those applications. And typically every single PeopleSoft customer would have a variety of periphery applications that do different specialized things. And those things would also have to be brought into the conversation when you're looking at a roadmap for your entire ERP application. Okay, so this is probably the most important slide in terms of how to scope, what all to think about, what all to cover as part of the assessment that goes into the roadmap. Once you have discussed and finalized the scope and what are the different areas that needs to be part of the assessment, the second aspect is around how you go about doing the assessment. And we have broken down into three simple project phases. So every assessment would go through these three phases, and how deep we go into each of this would be based on the entire scope, what we are trying to achieve, what is the scope of the assessment itself. But every assessment would definitely have all these three phases in this particular order. First starts with gathering all the required information. Now, as an external vendor, when we work with a customer, helping them to go through this assessment and roadmap exercise, most often we come in to, and this would be our starting activity. So starting with basic things like getting access to your system, where we can review the actual system, how it is set up, and how the system is installed, configured, how it is managed, all those aspects. Starting with those access, starting with the documents in terms of these operating procedures that you might be using or the training guides that you might have for end users. Reviewing those information would give us a lot of info. And again, even if you're doing this activity internally, collecting all of that information would be the key starting point. And we have come across organizations where this information is not readily available. So a way to get those information would be through interviews, to talking to people who are currently doing the job, who are currently managing the team that does the job. So the gathering activity could either be reviewing things that are already documented, and most often it could be about interviewing the right group of people and documenting, creating the documentation as part of the assessment itself. So starting with that, the next step is around the analysis, which is essentially the quick gap process around finding where you are having challenges and mapping it to what are the recommended, let's say, best practices, if there are best practices defined, or mapping it to with industry standards, what other customers are doing. And this is where and there is a difference between doing this work internally versus using external help, because the process around how other customers are doing it, especially customers who are successfully doing it, how they are able to do that, those are the information that really comes in handy with involving experts like us, where we work with different customers who have gone through a similar process. So bringing in that best practices and industry standard approach into the mix is very important. And then creating what would be your ideal roadmap plan for getting your processes and systems up to your ideal future state. All of that, majority of that, bulk of that work happens in that analysis phase of it. And the third aspect is the proposed phase, where all of this thing is put together and presented to the leadership, right, stakeholders, essentially consolidating and reporting our findings, right? So when we look at this exercise, the key outcome, the deliverable of it is going to be the roadmap and a plan, a detailed plan, not just the roadmap. The plan in terms of how to attain or how to reach that roadmap items, right? How to get it executed. And typically, we break this down into a timeline-based initiatives, where there are always items that could be addressed immediately, that could give you very good value, benefit value to different user groups in the organization. Would call it quick wins or low-hanging fruits. And then have projects that are prioritized and scheduled from short to medium to long term in terms of priorities, right? So all these activities happen to come up with that road mapping exercise. Okay, so these two aspects in terms of approach are the key aspects in terms of how we do it, and how you could use the similar approach to do it in your organization as well. Now, the next couple of slides go through a more detailed walkthrough of the process, and it's pretty self-explanatory in terms of breaking down the three phases that I said in terms of gathering and analyzing and proposing. Typically for PeopleSoft customers, these are the activities that we go through, starting with the system access, going through setting up a kickoff meeting, inviting the right stakeholders. I think the most important aspect that I haven't mentioned so far is stakeholder engagement, right? The success of the roadmap assessment and planning activity entirely relies on one thing, which is engaging the right stakeholders and making sure their challenges, their vision for what you need in future is heard. And that would, when I say stakeholders, that covers everything from the business owners, system owners, the teams that use the system, and the teams that maintain and support the system, all parties that are involved in the process. And this is more of a detailed activities. Now, if you're planning to create a schedule or a timeline, this is what this slide provides you the information that is needed. In terms of the deliverable, so typically when we talk about the assessment and roadmap as an activity, what is the output deliverable? The deliverable would look something of this side. This is a summary of a deliverable, of course. The deliverable document itself is quite detailed. Starts with an executive summary around what is the driver to do this assessment? What was the need? What was the objective to do it, and why it is being done? And a clear documentation around what's the current state process and system usage, focused on the scope of the assessment itself, collect what are the challenges and pain points that have been identified through various discussions, documentations, and talking to stakeholders, and what are the future state process and recommendations, and how to attain them, what are the different projects and dependencies between those projects and the timeline to achieve those things. And finally, a roadmap in terms of a visual representation of that plan, which is the roadmap itself. So all these items are part of that deliverables that are created. Typically, it would be a very detailed Word document and also a more summarized version of a PowerPoint presentation that gets presented to the leadership. All right, let me quickly check if there are any questions so far. I don't see anything both on the Portable app and also on the
Sorry, Logesh, I was on mute, but no, there's no questions yet.
Thanks, Cameron. Awesome. All right. So this is a sample in terms of an activities and timeline that we actually did for a customer. So an assessment and a road mapping exercise typically goes, I would say an average or median timeline would be around 6 weeks. It could go anywhere between 4 to 8 weeks. 6 is a median timeline that we look for an assessment. And it could for the assessment could be for one pillar of PeopleSoft application. It could be HCM or finance or supply chain, or it could be all encompassing depending upon how many applications you use. And regardless of it, many of these activities for each application would happen in parallel. So for customers who have done this assessment across all PeopleSoft pillars, there would be consultants working on different pillars in parallel. So the tasks are going to have move along around the same timeline. So an overall assessment period of around 6 weeks and 6 to 8 weeks is pretty standard for this kind of assessment. And with this approach, if you follow this approach internally to do this assessment, so this gives you an idea about how long it would take, and also broken down into what are the activities done during this time period. Okay. All right. I think for the next section, I'll hand it over to Cameron for discussing the road mapping activity.
All right, thanks, Logesh. And part of this is a reiteration of some of the things that Logesh talked about, but I'll just sort of put my spin on it as we go through the elements of what the kind of high level. We're going to drill into a specific use case after this. Logesh will be doing that, but I'll just kind of put my spin. So let's go on to the next slide there, Logesh. The roadmap that is going to be the most successful, as Logesh pointed out previously, it does have to cover the 3 Ps: the people, the process, and the platform. So let's start from the bottom. We as a PeopleSoft consulting firm are asked to come in and look at something related to PeopleSoft all the time, and we do that. That's our job. But we're always kind of saying, well, you're asking me to come here at the top, the platform, the technology piece, right? And you want us to sort of look at what you're doing, PeopleSoft, but so much of it is not actually PeopleSoft. So much of it is these things below it. And so let's kind of talk about that a little bit. When we talk about looking at the people that are involved, we're not talking about the process, we're talking about the people. This is a very sensitive topic, okay? And we get pulled in a lot of times to look at something like, hey, we want some help with system administration, or we want to, we lost this person and we need to do this. It becomes a pretty sensitive topic because our ability to see, and our job really is to pay attention to all of the trends, all of the latest things, all the latest technologies and all that stuff. So our people that's their job to do that. And a lot of times people internally at organizations, that's not their primary job to pay attention to all that stuff. Their primary job is to complete tasks and to fulfill the mission of that organization, whether that's IT or a functional group. And so there is often a gap between the people that are within organizations and the people that on the consulting side, who their main role is to kind of pay attention and to be up to speed on all the latest features and PUMs and people tools options and decustomization, et cetera. So sometimes be a gap about that. And that could be a sensitive topic, right? Like how do we protect our people? We're not looking to fire people within our organization. We're not looking to do that. But the common sort of thought of, well, we can maybe retool them to other things. That's a nice thing to say, but it's really hard in practice. And our experience has been that it's pretty hard to retool people. The reality is when we talk about people in the PeopleSoft world, most people that we interact with that, and this, you can look at your own organization, most people who are in key roles for PeopleSoft at your organization are most likely in their 50s and 60s. And that's a natural outcome of the fact that this was a significant project that happened most likely in the 2000s, maybe in the late 90s. And at that time, you weren't using the most junior people in your organization. You were using the people that were kind of maybe mid-level. And those people are now ending or getting near the end of their careers. And that's a difficult place to be for a lot of organizations. And so really doing a full evaluation of that, of the people that you have, and how do we, pull in the next generation of people to support this application. That's a pretty hard conversation. And we get pulled in all the time. And in fact, I just had one late last week, an organization who asked us to help recruit somebody, a full-time employee for them to do some of these aspects that where another person is leaving the organization, retiring. And I just said, honestly, that's a very tough ask because there's not this pool of candidates of people who are looking for full-time work, younger, and want to do PeopleSoft work. It's a very hard conversation. So this is a sensitive topic. There's no right or wrong answer, but you need to sort of really do a thorough and honest evaluation of your people. What skills do they have? Are they able to learn new things? Are they able to keep up with the technology? How do we empower them and to do those things? How do we free them up from some of the administrative tasks and get them focused on some of the things that are needed for the health of this application and a roadmap for this application? The thing I want to point out about the last bullet point here under people is the RACI, and actually I've heard it called other things. I always call it RACI, but the roles and responsibilities is called that. If you don't have one for your organization, you need to prioritize this really soon. Okay, so in your organization, you need to look at the different support groups, and that can be a financial support group, it's an HR group, it's a campus support group, it's IT, it is line of business area, it's all the people that are part of the ecosystem of supporting PeopleSoft. If you don't have a pretty good handle on how you do support, evaluation of new features, day-to-day, patching, system administration, new development. If you don't have that matrix and have a very good understanding of that, you need to do it. You need to do it now. And it's not something you do in isolation. You don't say, well, this is my opinion about who does things. No, that's something you have to do with those other groups, and you have to sort of figure it out. And there might be overlap. You might, going through that exercise, you might find that there's overlap between your group and another group. Well, who is responsible? What's the nuance between that? How do we negotiate between the two groups to say, why don't you guys do this, we'll do that, we'll work together, right? That's a difficult conversation, another sensitive conversation. I've been a part of a lot of those conversations, and it can be sensitive. I've been in both, where both organizations want to do something on that RACI, and I've been in a part where both groups don't want to do something on that RACI. And so trying to determine how do we fill that gap, right? So that's a really important part, and an honest evaluation of the people you have and their capabilities is really important. Kind of moving up from that, we think of this, and I really like this is a triangle, right? Because it's a pyramid. The foundation is our people, right? And we always have to talk about that first. The processes that we have in place, that could be both support processes, but really all the process. Think about the SDLC processes, right? So change management, communication, risk management. These are kind of standardized sort of process around management of your application. Do you have a pretty good understanding and documented approach to how you do support work, how you consider new features? Are those processes actually articulated in writing, or is it something that people have a different opinion on how things work? That can lead to a lot of problems, right? Because if you have a group over here just doing things because they think there's a process over here, they have their process, different group has their process, that can be a problem. Lastly, with the platform, and again, I say that last because we really have to talk about these other things before we start talking about PeopleSoft and obviously other emerging technology. That's where we focus then, and usually we get called in to help with that. But so much of it, like I said, comes from these other elements. It's really important to point that out. So drilling into some of what I just mentioned here, but we got to really align the three things. We can't focus on one or the other. We can't just focus on the platform with technology. We have to really understand the three things. Obviously, planning is key, and getting as many people included as possible. Business continuity is something that people often do as an exercise, reluctantly, or maybe because it's an audit type of situation where they have to do it. It really needs to be something that is proactively determined, again, documented, put down on paper, that you actually have something that can lead you to determine that you have gaps in your business continuity. That could mean that you need to consider things like cloud infrastructure, or other elements with how do you keep things moving. A lot of times when we talk about PeopleSoft, it is not an application that is associated with the for-profit revenue generating pieces of the organization. So for example, in financials or HCM, it's generally considered a back office application. And if it goes down for a day or two, it's not the end of the world. It's a bit of a problem, right? Large organization you get. Now, campus solutions, if you have students that can't register, it's a huge problem. So I don't want to minimize it, but I'm just saying that that's for your organization, your line of business. You can determine what are your unique continuity needs. So we often see with people that they get focused on the big projects, and nowhere is this more clear when we hear people talk about, well, we're not going to do anything with PeopleSoft because we're considering this new technology, whether it's a new SaaS application, or we don't want to implement that new module because we're going to consider this big other thing. And what happens is when we hear this from our customers, a lot of times we're saying, okay, let's talk again in about 3 years when you're going to say the exact same thing to me, that we're still considering this other thing. And what happens is all of the little things that should be done are not being done because nobody said, well, let's just put everything on hold. But you see that there's so many things that you could keep moving with. And what we happens with us is that we get pulled in after this gap of time where nothing's happened with the application. And so now it's like, now we got to do the big thing. We got to do People Tools upgrade. We have security vulnerabilities that we need to patch. So we have things we need to go do. So we really encourage people continue to create those small projects and get those sort of lined up and do them. Don't lose focus on the big projects, major projects, but don't stop, making progress in your application. Developing that rhythm of rolling out new features is going to really be beneficial to your customers within your organization. Obviously partnering with IT in the business areas, very, very important. Too often, and with your organization, does IT run the show or does the business run the show, and who's lead, who follows? Obviously, that's the norm. But if you can get to a situation where there's a true partnership and a common respect, that's a great place to be, and it's easier said than done. Let's put it that way. All right, end of life software. If you don't know the actual true end of life of all of your software and hardware, that is something you absolutely need to know. You can't do a true roadmap without understanding that fully. And I would say have an accurate understanding of that. So as we know, there might be people coming in and saying, hey, PeopleSoft is ending. And there's this, we've been hearing that for 15 years, right? People saying PeopleSoft is ending. It's end of life. Oh, did you see this date, 2033? That means it's ending in 2030. No, it doesn't. No, that's not what that means. Not at all. And so have an accurate understanding of your software. Now, if you look at other things, like for example, UPK is doing end of life here in December. Now it's moving to sustaining support, but that really is, in software language, that's end of life. So UPK is ending in December. And so what do you do with that? Do you have UPK scripts that you won't really be able to get support on managing those going forward? What do you consider? And of course, that's a quick plug for my Oracle guided learning topic that I did a presentation yesterday. We'll be doing a demo tomorrow as a replacement for UPK. But that's a really good sort of example of how in the sort of ecosystem of your PeopleSoft environment, you're going to have elements that are going to be end of life, and how do you sort of retrofit those things with keeping your core? And so that's obviously something you have to understand and goes in the mix. I'll kind of skip past some of these other ones. A couple ones I just want to point out. You are all involved, obviously, with Quest because you're here at Reconnect, and so kudos to you to participate. This is, in our estimation, the #1 PeopleSoft conference out there that is broad-based across a lot of industries. There are industry-specific ones like the higher education user group and the healthcare industry user group. Those are very specific and very good conferences for PeopleSoft content. With a slant or sort of a theme of higher education or healthcare. Those are great too. So getting involved in those, a lot of times those are actually free. Maybe there's a nominal charge to be involved in those, but those are excellent to be a part of. Hearing from your peers, hearing how do they deal with things. There's obviously message boards and all sorts of things that you can get involved with. So, that's a great way to keep yourself in sync with your roadmap. And the last point here about reducing your application footprint, I would say that we always would say that the best model is an integrated platform. So if you talk about, we have financial needs, we have HR needs, we have campus needs. What are the different elements of that? We would say, don't look at best of breed first. Look at PeopleSoft modular functionality first, okay? And some modules are more robust than others. We'll just be honest about that. And so, but really, if there's so many advantages to keeping an integrated environment and integrated modules that you should really consider that before you move on to saying, well, let's just go get the best of breed. Because your line of business, your business areas, that's exactly what they're going to think about first. They're going to say, yeah, no, let's go get this other application. IT will figure out how to get it all integrated. Easier said than done, as you all know very, very well. It's also not to say that you always should just go with PeopleSoft as modular. Sometimes there's going to be situations where you need to consider other best of breed applications and bolt them onto PeopleSoft. But understanding first the footprint that you have in PeopleSoft, what are capabilities. We personally do a lot of demos for Oracle. So if you call Oracle and say, hey, I need a demo of benefits administration, or I need a demo of lease administration on the financial side, Oracle's picking up the phone and they're calling Spear MC and saying, can you guys do this demo? So we do that. We help you guys with those demos to understand what those modules will do. And we always say, start there prior to going off and buying or implementing a non-Oracle application. It's just going to save you a lot of time. So the three sort of elements to consider for the platform technology roadmap, we really want to impress on you this idea of changing your mindset around continual innovation. This is where the entire software industry has gone. And whether you have gone there in your own mind or not is irrelevant to the fact that that's where exactly it's gone. So if you think about things like Office 365, you think about a lot of software as a service, that's exactly where it's gone. It's gone to a continual innovation, continual delivery model. PeopleSoft supports that model. So you need to get your mindset turned around to say, what do we need to do to embrace a continual delivery model with PeopleSoft? And of course, the PUM model with PeopleSoft Update Manager, that's going to help support that. I think you probably all know that Oracle is moving from 4 releases to 3 per year. That is not, just to be crystal clear, that is not an indication that the development is slowing down. The 3 PUM images per year will deliver more than the 4 did. Okay, so, or I should say the 3 will deliver the same amount as the 4. So each individual one will actually have more. I did hear when Paco said, I think you probably all heard it, that they might even consider going down to 2, or at least that's what he implied. That might be an option, but it's not going to change the amount of features that are going to come out in those on a yearly basis. It's just that how do we continually evolve and how do we continue to bring that in? And you have to change your mindset around that. Second, you need to consider cloud architecture, cloud infrastructure. We are, obviously, as I mentioned before, one of the leaders in bringing people to Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. There are other cloud infrastructures like AWS and Azure. Those are obviously get you some of the way there in terms of building capacity and elasticity and security on cloud infrastructure. OCI, or cloud infrastructure, brings you additional elements like PeopleSoft Cloud Manager, lifecycle management, autonomous database, autonomous Linux, all these other features that will only happen on OCI. So we always say, consider OCI first if you're an Oracle PeopleSoft customer. But the idea of saying, how do we kind of consider that sort of long-term roadmap? And do we want to be in the data center business? I have customers who told me one year, and I actually walked with them through their halls, and one of my customers, who I won't say their name, they said, look at this, isn't it beautiful? And it was a data center. And of course, he's an IT manager. He said, look, isn't this beautiful data center? That next year, he said, hey, we need to talk about getting off of our data center and onto cloud infrastructure. That's the natural progression, right? And so you need to consider that. And then lastly, embrace emerging technology. This is sometimes, again, a mindset for PeopleSoft customers that, our PeopleSoft, it's an application that's been around a long time. We can't embrace emerging technology. There has never been more of a connection between emerging technology and the PeopleSoft application than there is now. So we're talking about things like machine learning with respect to putting your application on OCI with machine learning and AI to determine how to do auto scaling, bringing your application up and making it more robust and bringing it back down when you don't need that more robust nature. Integration of chatbots into the interface. Oracle guided learning that takes a digital adoption platform that we see everywhere with a lot of new websites and bringing that guided learning, guided processing right into PeopleSoft. And there's a whole bunch of other emerging technologies, autonomous database, et cetera. All of that can be used in PeopleSoft in ways now in 2022 that weren't true just a few years ago. So you need to now pay attention to what are those emerging technologies and how can we embrace those for PeopleSoft. All right, we're going to go to the next slide. And so the last couple slides talks a little bit about something that you need to have for your organization. Again, a lot of stuff you're hearing today from us are things that we do for people, but is not, we don't have exclusive rights to do that for you. You can do it for yourself. This is a simple sort of visualization of a project organization structure, but I would call it also your system support structure. So this could be a sister document to a project RACI. So what we're looking at here is top down sort of, you have the governance layer, which is an oversight committee that can be, has to be a combination of business, IT, functional areas. And that group is tasked with their own specific responsibilities like vision and goals, authority over this entire program, scope and budget, all of that. They're the public leaders of this organization. If you don't know who that is right now for PeopleSoft for you, that's a good place to start in establishing that. From that, there's a very specific project management or project oversight team who has very specific day-to-day management over the actual goings on in PeopleSoft. And that could lead a program or specific projects. From there, we always think about 3 pillars in the project delivery. So there's functional area or areas, and that could be one or multiple. There's development in the PeopleSoft, so there's kind of your developers and sort of the core technical pieces, and then there's system administration and infrastructure. Those are our 3 pillars. So when we are approached and say, can you do a project or can you do managed services? It's one of those 3 pillars. It's functional support, it's development support, it's infrastructure, system admin support. And so you need those 3 areas represented. At any point, if you look at how you support your organization, you're going to have a mix of potentially your own employees as well as outside service providers. That's fine. Embrace that, right? Embrace the idea that your organization and your people go beyond your walls, that you're going to include people from outside the organization and they are in your mix. And you should expect the level of professionalism. In fact, you can expect sometimes more because you can put it in a contract. SLAs, all of that should be expected of anybody that's outside your walls, but you're going to consider that as part of your team. And then of course, there's then this sort of cloud of people who are additional subject matter experts, whether that's functional or technical. It could be people that within specific business areas who have specific knowledge and needs in their specific area. So putting together structure is going to be a very, very important exercise for you, and one that obviously we help with and put together when we do projects. Lastly, on my slide, we have just using that same sort of model, the goals, objectives. This is just a quick visual. Goals, objectives, directions come down from the top, from your steering committee, your oversight committee, and then there's an escalation path. This level of visualization is really simple, and yet it actually is important for people to kind of look at and really understand their role, who's supposed to be doing what, how do I escalate, how do we work through these issues. A lot of times it's so simple that people don't actually even go and document this stuff or put something like this together, but it's really, really important. The last point I'll make before I turn it back over to Logesh to do the case study, and you can go to the next slide, Logesh, is that when we talk about doing roadmap sessions and assessments, I just want to point out that you can do this work yourself. Now, we do it, of course, we come in and do it, but I will point out to you to be very, very cautious about who you engage to do your assessment and roadmap. Every single person, whether it's a partner like us or people within your organization, you all have your own biases. We have our own biases. If you bring us in to do a roadmap and your real intent is to move to Workday or to some other application, we're the wrong partner to work with, okay? We are very loyal and integrated with PeopleSoft. And so we're gonna be working with you to understand how do you maximize your effectiveness and use of PeopleSoft. That's our bias. Okay, and we'll be honest about that. If you go and approach a different partner, understand who pays their bills and who are they aligned with. Okay, so if you work with another partner, what do they do? And there's PeopleSoft partners who actually are potentially have other sort of elements where they maybe are only leading with Amazon, Amazon Web Services, or maybe they are wanting to take you to their own infrastructure. Be aware of that. Be aware of what that organization and where they want to take you, because very, very unlikely that you're going to get a completely impartial, completely 100% objective roadmap. You don't get one from us either. We are going to say, how do you maximize your PeopleSoft investment? So I just want to point that out. And that is true even for internal people at your organization. Your IT group might have their own intentions and they're going to bias towards what they want to do. Your functional group is going to be biased to what they want to do. So just be aware of that. Go into it understanding that people have their own biases and perhaps want to take it in different places. And so when you engage somebody to help you, or if you do it internally, you have to keep that understanding as you go through. And Logesh, I'll turn it back to you.
Thanks, Cameron. It was very informative. And just wanted to highlight one item that you mentioned when you're talking about the people, partner, and platform, people, technology, and platform aspects. One of the key reasons that organizations engage as an external partner like us to do this roadmap and assessment work is most often that wherever this request is originating from, it's hard for organizations or particular departments or business functions in the organizations to break down those barriers across multiple departments and engage the right audience to do a holistic review and come up with a roadmap. All right, so that's where it's highly important that to make sure all the right required stakeholders are involved, the right business functions are covered, and the right applications are reviewed. That's a reason why a partner like us really makes sense in terms of doing this assessment work. Now, I think we are into the last few minutes of the session, and I want to quickly highlight a case study, which is a visual representation of the roadmap that we have done for one of the large healthcare customers. And I would also like to highlight that please, if there are any questions, please do use the Pathable app, and I'll leave a couple of minutes to review any questions and address them. So what you're seeing on the screen here is an actual output deliverable of a roadmap for a customer, a large healthcare client. And we engaged with this client, which is in a very common way that we have come across multiple customers and conversations we have at conferences, where the customer has been using PeopleSoft HR and finance application for a long time. And they are engaged with Oracle in a way that they're aware of what is coming out, what is happening, but their system hasn't been kept up to date. Their system, there is a significant difference between what they see PeopleSoft can do versus what they are doing internally, right? That's very common that we hear from a lot of customers. And we work through the same process that we discussed so far in terms of gathering, analyzing the information, and putting together a plan and roadmap for them. And this is how a 5-year roadmap for that customer looks like. And essentially, when an organization is not in sync with what is happening, what is out there, then the first step is to essentially start with getting current in terms of the tools and the application, making sure you are on the current version to start with, and then figuring out what are the value-adding features that you can add, modules that you can add, and so forth. A couple of things I want to highlight here. There are always going to be cyclical activities that happen on a yearly basis, both in HCM and finance system. Things like your 1099 processing, things like your year-end activities, open enrollments, all those things that would happen. You can see in this particular picture, all of them are grouped in the bottommost section in dark green. And we know those things are going to happen, and we want to make sure the critical timelines for those cyclical activities are avoided when we do any projects. And the remainder top half of the section talks about various projects that this customer is doing or we have recommended, and all the projects in blue are already in progress in 2022. since they have already gone through the process of getting current in terms of tools and technologies. And everything in orange is essentially the projects and functionalities that are scheduled for the next couple of years. So this is an outcome of all the work in terms of understanding where they're having challenges, where they're having pain points, and how to address them. One quick example I want to call out is to a point that Cameron made. The consolidation of application can save a lot of cost and effort in terms of maintenance, cut down the moving parts. For this customer, they're basically moving from 3 to 5 different applications they had for the various functions around time and scheduling, etc., and moving into the PeopleSoft delivered modules. So all those came out of the discussions of pain points and proposing a solution that would meet those items. So that's the outcome here. I see we are pretty much right on time. Let's see if there are any questions. I don't see any questions on both Pathable and the chat window. So our contact information is in the slide deck, and the slide deck is a copy of it is attached as part of the Pathable app as well. So feel free to reach out if you to either me or Cameron on any of your questions regarding any of the items we have discussed today.
Yeah, and I'll just add that I apologize. I know I spoke long, so I'm sorry about that. I think a lot of stuff here in the case study you can kind of read through and kind of see what some of the conclusions are from the case study. But bottom line is, this was very specific to one customer. The roadmap, the work that we do is really designed to first say, what are your goals? And then what's going to come out of that is going to be completely based on your goals. What you'll see here was simply one organization and their goals. So we don't have one size fits all for when we come in and work with people. So just keep that in mind when you go through the rest of these slides.
Absolutely. Great point, Cameron. Thank you. All right. Thank you, all of you, and have a good rest of the conference, and hope to see you in another session of ours. Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right. Thank you.